Three, two.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us for our weekly media briefing today. I'm Scott Peterson, Manager of Media Relations, and filling in for Lorna this week, moderating. Joining Mark today on his weekly media briefing is Dr. Bridgers, Ed Sean O'Donnell, as well as we have Dr. Stoddard and Luisa Cardona on the call as well. So without further ado, Mark, hope you've had a good day and a fun morning and
Yeah,
with doing Read Across America. So please get us started.
yeah, we're going to start with something fun. I did get to go to the Precious Moments Family Childcare in Rockville this morning to read to the children there for Read Across America Week. And this is something I've done for many years because of how important early education and reading are for developing children. When I was on WBAL radio last week, the host asked me about potential cuts from the General Assembly on the blueprint. And I said then, and I still believe it, that early childhood education needs to be prioritized. There's simply no other aspect of the blueprint that would have as positive an impact on the success of children than the wide implementation of early childhood education. If anything is a game changer among all the recommendations they made, this is the game changer. We've talked about it for years. We talk about how students enter kindergarten at the level of a 3-year-old many times, not a 5-year-old, and what that means for reading and comprehension. The studies on vocabulary deficits show the long-term impact if those children leave kindergarten below grade level. It puts them at a disadvantage as they move forward. We would save money on later efforts to intervene by getting it right from the start. This is our opportunity with very young children to get them ready and get them to ready right. It has long-term cost benefit by reducing the need for interventions in later grades. It also makes kids more successful, and being able to be successful and feel like you can manage the work in the classroom you're in psychologically affects kids and how they behave. Kids who feel like they're failing and struggling, it's easier for them to give up and tune out. And when they tune out when they're young, they're tuned out for the rest of their educational life. And that's a problem that we can avoid. There's recent work following elementary age children shows that low socioeconomic status groups enter school with substantially smaller vocabularies, and that differences in word learning processes over the early grades help explain why those gaps in vocabulary and reading persist. They do persist. Being able to read is vital to building a child's vocabulary and increasing their comprehension. Another study showed, I'm quoting here, school-age vocabulary and reading interventions improve targeted skills, especially when intensive and explicit, but they rarely erase the full SES-related gap established before or at its school entry. This means, the short of it is it means that not addressing this early, even with all the interventions we try, they rarely erase the gap when you do these interventions later. There's no more effective time when the kids are young. Their brains are actually most plastic and most rapidly learning. There's a biological reason for that, why these interventions work better early than later. And it's just, to me, one of the most important things we can do. If we really want to change this, we've got to think about, getting more serious about funding early childhood. I was a school teacher. I think you all know that. I taught fourth and fifth grade, and very early on in my career, I was doing a read aloud with 4 kids, and we were sitting in a little corner of the room, and each one was reading a page. And I was stunned that each kid was reading a different page. Until you've seen it and heard it, you may not be able to understand the full import of that. But you had 4 different kids who had different words that they did not know, who substituted in all cases, wrong words and words that changed the meaning of what they were reading, so that the effect was at the end of reading a page or reading a story, none of them had actually read the story that was written. None of them had the comprehension of the story because they made so many changes in vocabulary that there was no way to hold on to those stories. So you can see it, and it's a real thing that plays out. I saw it when I was teaching, and it's totally real. So not addressing things early means that they're not going to be fully remediated later, even with very positive interventions. Of course, the long-term effects are going to affect the school develop this, I mean, the skill development of these children, and it's going to affect their ability to access jobs. And speaking of jobs, access to early childhood education helps women re-enter the workforce, which is good for business and great for family incomes. And the cost of ECE is a real barrier for middle-class families as well. There are not a lot of people who can afford to pay $15,000 to $20,000 a year for one child, let alone if they have a couple of children in a span of 2 or 3 years. So this is expensive. It has major costs for society. We pay for it in multiple ways. And early childhood, if we could get this right, you would not have another generation of kids who need to struggle with this. Um, Last September, the county announced a $10 million investment in early childhood education. Money's helped us launch 3 initiatives to get children into early education programs sooner. I hope we can all play a role in helping our children be ready for kindergarten. I want to thank the Children's Opportunity Alliance for setting up this morning's event. I had a good time. The kids were great. Um, it was really cool to see the way they reacted to the story and the common level of understanding that all these kids seemed to have. It was a really gratifying experience. They are one of the many essential partners in our community who help families in our area with not just daycare, but with high quality early childhood education. On a more grim subject, many of our houses of worship and religious communities have reached out to us about fears of how the conflict in the Middle East isn't going to impact them here, from fears about how this will impact their loved ones to how hate crimes may target their communities. While this conflict may be oceans away, many of our residents here are experiencing fear, loss, and anxiety. And of course, we've seen hate crimes, so it's not like those fears are unfounded. We're thinking of our diverse communities, our Muslim, Jewish, Zoroastrian, Baha'i, and Christian neighbors who have loved ones abroad and fear experiencing hate here in the county. We must remember that no individual or community are responsible for the war abroad. We didn't ask for it. We didn't plan it. We didn't vote for it. It's not ours. At the same time, hate has no place in Montgomery County. However it started, we need to maintain what we believe are our best values. I want to thank MCPD for quickly addressing safety concerns in the community last weekend when combat actions began in Iran and in a community that is this ethnically and religiously diverse as we are. MCPD has stepped up patrols around religious institutions in case this global conflict prompts domestic terror here. We've had no reports of any direct threats. I've heard anecdotal reports of a couple of mosques that had they would describe as hate incidents, but I have not had a full briefing on that yet. And we're doing it out of an abundance of caution. We're trying to make sure that people feel safe, and we can make sure we have the people in place to keep people safe. Everyone deserves that. I want to acknowledge our Office of Community Partnerships and our interfaith liaison, Kate Chance, who connects our county government with local houses of worship. Last night, I attended the county-hosted iftar in Rockville with Kate. The conflict was a major concern among attendees, similar to discussions in synagogues. There is a widespread fear of backlash from the conflict, whether it affects loved ones overseas or increased hate-related events here in the county. It is undoubtedly a troubling time. Additionally, while there have been no military installations in Montgomery County, we do have a significant number of active duty and folks in the military community, including many parents and family members of those who are serving. I'm sure they're concerned and, like the rest of us, caught by surprise by this sudden decision. I hope that our folks come home safe, sound, and soon. We still haven't been given clear answers as to why the U.S. and Israel were compelled to act. The president and his people can't seem to get their story straight. We've heard everything from threat of nuclear weapon to insinuations of an imminent terrorist attack to the false idea that our president is doing this for the people of Iran. I think one of the most frightening things I saw was military commander telling the troops that the president was anointed by Christ to do this. I thought that was a bit weird, but not something that anybody in the military ought to be saying to their troops, because that is patently untrue. This failure to communicate to the public basically has resulted in everyone having a much higher level of anxiety than we did a week ago. It's important for anyone struggling with stress of this news to please reach out for mental health support if you are reaching the point where you don't know what to do. And I'm also concerned about our kids and young adults and how they're going to be interpreting what's unfolding there. For anyone needing help, we want you to call our crisis hotline at 240-777-4000. Back to more domestic issues, and ongoing domestic related problems created by Trump administration. I want to appreciate the county council for proposing the ICE Out bill. This legislation aims to prevent privately owned immigration detention facilities in Montgomery County by blocking the issuance of permits for facilities like this. I fully support the efforts whose goals are to prevent or reduce the destructive actions of ICE in our community. The number of people in immigration detention reached a new high of more than 60,000 last summer, breaking a modern record set during the first Trump administration. That's up from 39,000 people when Trump came into office. And I just point out, if you have 39,000 people in detention centers, it wasn't like the previous president wasn't doing anything. This escalation will continue, and with ICE's budget growing exponentially with the passage of a new budget, immigration arrests are going to require extensive resources. And now at least 75 billion has been carved out for ICE over the next 4 years. That's up from last year's $11 billion spend. It means extensive recruiting efforts, and then more room will be needed for detainees. When the president claims they're focused on the worst offenders, that's patently untrue. I hope none of you actually believe that. I'm tired of seeing that, immigrants who are undocumented have committed felonies. They have not committed felonies. When we get served with a detainer, they are civil detainers. They're not criminal detainers. And that's what we get from ICE. So even they know these are people who've committed felonies just by being here. It's unfortunate that much misinformation is going out to people. And it's really sad that, to read people welcoming this as if immigrants are a bunch of criminals. I wonder how they would have felt when their grandparents came over if everybody characterized them as criminals. I don't recall the U.S. sending out invitations back then. I commend groups like the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops for speaking out about detention facilities conditions. Community and faith leaders are justly concerned about the humanitarian and moral implications of this ICE expansion. And their statement, I want to highlight. They said, Catholic teachings exhort nations to recognize the fundamental dignity of all persons, including immigrants. We bishops advocate for meaningful reform of our nation's immigration laws and procedures. Human dignity and national security can coexist if people of goodwill work together. That's a profound message they sent to approximately 62 million Catholics who live in this nation. As a local government, we must advocate for methods that ensure community safety while respecting everyone's fundamental rights. We're not going to support policies driven by hate and fear, and nor will we allow an immigration detention center in Montgomery County. And more not fun news coming out of the Trump administration. Last week, I highlighted really good news for the National Institutes of Health because their budget was restored at an even higher level than the year before. But now we're learning that they have a new challenge coming from the Trump administration. To no one's surprise, I guess I was overly optimistic last week. This is about the president being a very sore loser. President Trump didn't get his way with his budget to destroy NIH, which was passed because they restored the funding. The budget ended the longest federal shutdown in U.S. history, so his administration is now slow to spend the money approved by Congress for the National Institutes of Health and National Science Foundation and NASA. Traditionally, after a budget signed into law, which it's been done, agencies have a 30-day window to spend a portion of their full annual funding. They receive full funding once a spending plan is approved by the White House. The Office of Management and Budget, for some agencies, the 30-day allowance has actually been denied. And you can see from this chart, the number of grants awarded by February 20th is very small, way down from where it was compared with over the 2,300 in earlier fiscal years. So he's finding new ways or old ways of withholding money and keeping it from being spent, even though he's supposed to be spending it. As noted in this chart on the screen, NIH has only 30% of new and repeating grants in its budget, as it has for over the last 6 years. This is a considerable amount of money that's being installed, and that not only concerns me for the sake of science and cures for diseases or the innovations that are discovered with this research funds, it's also bad for our local biotech companies that should be receiving support through these research grants. Committee leaders charged with developing government spending bills are outraged. They've demanded that OMB release the funds, but it's unclear when this will happen. I will say that at least, the granting of the funds in the first place came about as a bipartisan decision. So it's incredibly unfortunate to see the president not only thwarting Democrats, but thwarting Republicans and trying to get legislation that would be really helpful and meaningful for the American people. This is the last thing that's needed after a 43-day shutdown, the pause grant application review and agency work. It's beyond frustrating to see Trump and his allies thumb their nose at decisions made in the best interest of the country. Whether it's Congress, the courts, or the people of this nation showing resistance, they seem to continuously find a way around being uh, around being told no. They just can't accept no for an answer. Let's hope these stall tactics end soon so our federal workforce and contractors can get back into the labs and offices that drive breakthroughs and that jumpstart innovation. I'm going to end on a happy note. Coming on the heels of last week's tax increment financing announcement for the Viva White Oak project, we have more good news. The developer MCB Real Estate has named its first anchor tenant, Costco. This will be a brand new Costco and will add to the company's stores in Montgomery County, bringing added value to the residents of East County and beyond. According to MCB Real Estate, plans include having a gas station at this location. It's beyond exciting to share news that this excites in so many in our community. Costco is probably one of the most popular retailers around. And I also appreciate some of their social policies and their determination to continue to do the right thing. I look forward to sharing new developments as the Viva White Oak project moves forward. Before we open it up to questions, I'd like to give my staff a chance to share any updates that they'd like to share. And I'll start with the health team.
Good afternoon, Mr. County Executive, and thank you for sharing our crises hotline, especially for those individuals who may have to manage stress or are managing stress associated with the current conflict that we have in the Middle East. Dr. Davis couldn't be here today, nor could Monica Martin, our Chief of Behavioral Health Scientist, but both of them are clinicians, and they asked me just to share a few points in addition to your comments. They'd like for you to know that if you're experiencing stress and you are having conversations with your family members or your children, it's always good to be informed, but they recommend that you take a break from social media and the news to reduce exposure to the negative events. They are upsetting and can be upsetting, so that's the first point. The other point is they recommend that you take a moment to unwind. Just step away from the television, step away from your cell phone, and just do some deep breathing just to relax, to stretch, and to meditate and practice mindfulness to, again, take away from the noise that can often consume us regarding war or related activities. Practice gratitude. Remind yourself and others. Think of things that you're grateful for. We know that the war and many things that are happening at the federal level or even downtown with the president and his administration can be upsetting. But take time to write down those things that you are grateful for and what you appreciate. Take care of your body. Get enough sleep, move more, and eat healthy, which goes back to taking time to unwind. And last but not least, talk to folks who you trust and who are concerned or share some of the same concerns and talk about how that makes you feel and how it makes your children feel and how it makes your community feel. These are things that you should discuss and practice as we continue to navigate the optics and the narratives that are associated with war. Again, if these tips just aren't working for you, please reach out to our 24-hour, 7-day-a-week crisis helpline. That number again is 240-777-4000. And I'll turn it over to Sean O'Donnell now for his health updates.
Thank you, Dr. Bridgers. So I just want to share a little bit of information um, on what we're doing with monitoring and coordinating with our partners at the local and state level, and as well as with DC Water with regards to the Potomac River leak. Um, we realized that earlier this week, the District of Columbia Department of Health lifted their advisory on recreation on the water. Um, you may see other counties that are further downriver doing lifting their advisories as well. Um, in Montgomery County, our advisory is still in effect to avoid the water, particularly around the spill and downriver from where that leak occurred along the Montgomery County border. The good news is there's lots of water testing going on between DC Water, Maryland Department of the Environment, the Potomac River Keepers, as well as our other jurisdictional partners. And that water testing is showing that as you go further downriver, the bacteria levels have been pretty good over the last week or so. The areas right around where the spill happened are still showing concerningly high levels of E. coli. And we're working with, again, our state and local partners to do some additional testing around that area to have a better idea of how wide that area of concern is. And we'll keep looking at it. We're encouraged that we're going to get some sunshine in the next few days that hopefully will help to fight back some of the bacteria that's there. The UV does a really effective job of reducing that. But we want to make sure that it's safe before we tell our residents to go out in that area. The other thing we wanted to mention is the land that is right around where the leak happened. That still has contamination from the sewage that flowed over it. From the recent updates from DC Water, they have a remediation plan that they're going to put into effect that has been approved by the National Park Service and will be monitored by our state colleagues. But that area right where the sewage went, we're still there's signage that's posted to remind people to not go in contact with that area. So we just want to emphasize that as well as part of our advisory. We'll keep looking at the data that comes in, and as things improve, we'll make updates to that advisory and we'll publicize that out to the community. We do want to see the recreational activities resume as soon as possible. And especially as the weather becomes nicer, people are going to be interested in doing that. And so we're meeting and working with the communities that have recreational activities out there. We just want to put this message out to anyone who's listening that we're monitoring, and we'll provide updates as we get safety data back. And I can turn it over to Dr. Stoddard if he has any additional updates.
No additional updates there.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. And we'll now turn it over to the media. As always, please raise your hand if you have a question. I see Miss Jacoby, your hand went up first. So first come, first served. Go ahead.
Hello. I have sort of a two-part question going back to the subject of ICE in Montgomery County. I've been hearing some reports recently from Councilmember Kristen Mink and U.S. Senator Chris Van Hollen, basically talking about how they're seeing or hearing about increased ICE operations in Montgomery County. I'm just wondering, one, if the county executive or the administration has any knowledge of these reports and whether or not they're accurate, and then two, what the county is doing to prepare in the event that ICE does significantly increase its footprint here.
Not a fun question. Anecdotally, I hear people saying they're seeing more incidents. ICE doesn't report what they do, and we're not everywhere ICE is, or we don't know every action that's taken. And so it's hard for us to track like numerically. But I think as their presence increases, we'll see a lot more activities, and we'll probably have a better handle on where they're going with this. we fully expect, you've probably seen the reports. They've moved like 90 vehicles to Westernport, Maryland. I'm sure those vehicles aren't for Westernport. I'm pretty sure they're being distributed, wind up around the state. I know that in Hyattsville, next to PG Plaza, they've rented space in an office building over there. So they're right on our border. And we know they're in Baltimore. So we expect the activity to increase. The county, I think we've tried to be clear. We're going to do everything we can to continue to provide support to people. We will do everything we can to let people know if we know in advance where activities are going to be. We can cooperate in making sure people get, alerts about that to the extent that's possible. But, the county is hamstrung in some of the most important things. I would love to be able to say our police, will block ICE from doing this. Our police can't do that. So without the ability to stop them, it gets challenging in terms of what you can effectively do. I think we've got to provide people with as much information, give them much as a heads up as we possibly can so they can avoid places where activities are taking place and continue to work with the community so that, people's safety can in large part be affected by how much the public actually participates. I'd say that in Minneapolis, the public's resistance to what ICE was doing played, not a small role in the decision to pull out of the city. Once, you have enraged enough of the population, I think that their activities become more difficult to execute. And hopefully people here, when they see these things happening, will stand up for their neighbors and be visible witnesses to what ICE is doing, but also hopefully be visible deterrents for ICE. But I'm not happy about what awaits us.
Hi.
Earl or Louisa, do you want to add
Yeah.
anything to this? And Louisa, please introduce yourself and your title since you might be new to the folks.
Yeah. Luisa Cardona, Assistant Chief Administrative Officer. Just to add on to what the county executive has said, yes, we do anticipate an increase in activity. We are seeing all the signs for that in terms of what families and individuals can do to prepare. I do want to emphasize family preparedness. The family preparedness guides, completing those, ensuring that your family has a plan, particularly if you have children, so that your children are with the person that you want to care for them, right? This is really critical. Part of family preparedness is also ensuring that documentation, that your loved ones know how to access it and are able to get that information to the authorities when needed or to contact an attorney. Family preparedness, a lot of people think I should just be ready, but it is a guide, right? It is a guide that you complete. You fill out certain pages, you fill out who you want your children to go to. It's paperwork that you should complete and documentation that you should have on hand and your loved one should know how to access. And this is really important. So if families and individuals want access to that and want help completing that, we do want to direct them to the Gilchrist Immigrant Resource Center. It is really important that this is completed. That is one of the emphasis. And just like the county executive said, if you're a community member who feels like you would like to engage and potentially go out and be an observer or a protester, please do take training in order to do that. We want everyone to do that safely. We want everyone to know their rights and to be protected by their rights. So taking those trainings is very critical if you're also looking to engage. And through the Gilchrist page, you can also find that information. That referral line is 240-777-4940.
Earl, did you want to add anything there before we move on to the next question?
No, I would just say we're in constant communication with the federal delegation as well as the governor's office on what's being seen around the state. And when we have factual information, we provide it. We don't often talk too much about the rumors because we hear a lot of them. And so obviously it's a balance of making sure that people have actionable, truthful information and not getting people too worked up over rumors that may emerge. As Ms. Cardona alluded to, we are anticipating an increase, and I think we're very much expecting it. We're not sure if it's going to be this week, this month, next month. We do expect it, but we also know that we want to make sure we're providing that actionable information to families because people make real world decisions around information that's out there. People will decide whether they go to work, whether they send their kids to school or not. And so, we try very much not to deal in rumor and try and deal as much as we can in fact, recognizing that we won't necessarily always have the facts before they emerge. And so we're trying to do as best as we can to keep people informed and working with our nonprofit partners to make sure that the resources are there on the ground to respond when things do happen, and help people be prepared, but also when the actions do get taken by the federal government, that we're there to help those who are left behind.
Thank you, Louisa, Mark, for that. Also, thanks, Tracy and team, for putting the phone numbers in the chat for the Gilchrist Immigrant Resource Center, as well as the 24-hour crisis hotline. So please, reporters, open up your chat, and those numbers are in there for reference. Adam Tuss, King of the Roads from Channel 4, thank you for joining us.
I'll take
Nice
that
to have you
title.
on.
Thank you very much, Scott. And thanks everyone for holding this briefing today. Mr. County Executive, I know you're an electric vehicle proponent. Wondering if I can get your thoughts on this report that MCPS is kind of shifting away from their electric school bus policy and purchasing more diesel buses for the school system.
So I actually think it's wrong. They had a problem with buses, and part of the problem had to do with COVID and a shortage of parts and the inability to keep them on the road. But the same company that had a hard time with electric buses was also having a hard time with regular buses because some of the parts are uniform across the type of bus. I'll just say in general, electric buses have continued to evolve, and they continue to be growing at a pretty rapid rate across the country. Electric buses provide long-term savings, and I don't know whether they manage the contract right or not. I mean, there are a lot of questions I don't know, but I don't understand not going out for bids. There are something like 21 different models of electric buses now, and there are 7 or 8 companies in the manufacturing of electric buses. When they did that contract, there were only a couple of companies one was a little bit established, but there are people who were just transitioning into electric buses. The electric bus landscape is way different now. And the fact that I can't say it's a fact. If they didn't look at electric options, if they didn't ask people for demos, if they didn't ask other jurisdictions that have bought the buses, what's your experience with the buses, to just make a decision based on a bad experience you had, is not a sound enough reason to make a decision. I mean, if the universe changed, the landscape changes, and you see, more advances and, more growth in the business, you would think if this was a major problem, everybody else would be shrinking their fleets, and that's not what's happening.
You worry that this is it for the school system in terms of what they're going to do with electric buses, or do you think that there's a way that they can get back on track?
I hope it's not it, and maybe the county council and us need to consider legislation saying the county money can't be spent on diesel buses. Diesel buses are dirty. Diesel's they're not even using natural gas buses, which are a step up. They're picking the dirtiest vehicles to put on the road, and that's not a good idea.
Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. I do not see any more hands up in the chat, or I believe.
Scott,
Any other questions? Okay, your hand was back up. I couldn't tell whether it
No,
was
it's okay.
from before, so go ahead. Another question.
This is a sewage question for probably someone on the health team. DC Health Department lifted their recreational advisory for the Potomac that they issued after the sewage spill. I'm just wondering, what's the reason for Montgomery County still having sort of an advisory not to go out and make contact with the water in the river?
There are still high levels, higher levels than are optimal near the site of the original spill, and so that we are still seeing unsafe levels to some degree, and the reason is basically in the sewage, uh, got into the river, it had to cross a canal and a bunch of land between the canal and the river. And so while anybody downstream from us is just dealing with what got dumped in the river, every time it rains, more of that sewage that, went over the land between the leak and the river is being washed into the river. So I'm sure we've got residual. I know they're talking about having to remove contaminated soils. That's going to take a while to get the contaminated soils out of there, but it wouldn't surprise me that until a combination of removal and constant washing out with rain, not that I like rain all the time, it's going to take a while for everything to get cleared from feeding into the river. That's what I understand. But yeah, I think, Sean's on the call. Maybe he'd like to add to that.
Yeah, I actually went down to the site this morning, and there are signs posted by DC Water warning people not to use the parts of the land where the sewage traveled across. So there's those localized concerns about just people walking around the area. We don't want them or their pets or their children to, to get sick or to track, sewage back with them. But as far as recreating in the water, which I think is the biggest thing that we're hearing from the community, especially as you go further down the river, those are things we're looking at. Again, we're in the conversations we had since we did the town hall with the localized community. We spoke to a lot of folks who organize different river activities or have different activities on the small islands that are in that immediate area. And they said to us they want to make sure that it's safe before they go back out. And so we've been working with MDE and with the Potomac River Keepers and with DC Water to try to set up some additional testing at those spots in Montgomery County. It's clear that as you go further down, the river itself is less contaminated. It's even less contaminated as you go further down in Montgomery County, but we want to do some additional testing to be sure before we tell people to go out there. The water that's moving in the middle of the river is fast moving. It dilutes pretty quickly. The water that is more closer to the edges, that's something we want to look at and again give some assurances. I think, what we've said before is there's always some level of bacteria in the river, and so the advisories we give reflect what EPA considers an acceptable level of bacteria, right? So we're going to tell people to be careful when they're out there. If at all possible, don't ingest any water from the river, no matter where you are on the river, right? But we want to look at some of that data. That the Maryland Department of Environment data, they're doing testing today, so we should hopefully have some additional data in the next day or two. The DC Water data comes out generally the evening following the day they collected it. So so far the area right around the spill is still showing very high contamination. The other areas downstream are looking better, but we do want to test some of that. We'd like to test some of the sediment as well, just to, it's one thing to test the running water.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sean. Any other questions from the media before we depart? All right. Mark, you want to say anything before we adjourn?
Have a nice, warm, but wet next few days. And I'm looking forward to higher temperatures next week. And it doesn't look like freezing is around the corner for a while. So enjoy ourselves a little bit more.
Well, please knock on wood. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. And I hope everyone has a great week as well.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you all.